Hello, Nick. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Max. Nice to see you.
That's perfect. So I've joined one of your semen retention containers a couple years ago. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's had a profound impact on my healing journey as well. And I just wanted to ask you, like, why do you think semen retention is such an important thing, especially, if we could learn about that early on in our male careers of growing up?
It's a great question. I think it's important because, the fact that most people don't know about it, they don't understand it. And the reason it is important is because it holds so much power. And if we truly knew what we're doing when we're ejaculating, I think most people would they would rethink it, at least to the point that guys ejaculate. I think one of the reasons porn is so freely available is because it gets guys to ejaculate unconsciously and kind of ferociously and consistently, and it keeps them really drained and ineffective. And you have a whole lot of men in society who are drained and ineffective and not living truly with vitality and a deep sense of purpose. And you have a whole bunch of very easily controlled men.
Yeah, I can agree to that. I mean, I was also in that same realm, right? Like
Same.
We were passing around hard drives in school, like 14 years old, just like gigabytes of porn. Fucking insane. Yeah, it's crazy.
No, thank God the internet. I had dial-up when I was at home. I had dial-up going, and it would take me close to an hour to get a 10-second clip, and I'm grateful that that's where I was.
Yeah, nowadays it's crazy. Yeah, I would agree. I think there's a reason why it's so freely available, and there's no restrictions on that, as per usual, right? Like,
yeah.
There's so many, things out there that kind of seem like they're random, but they're not, right?
Exactly.
I want to go back a bit, and would I like to ask you about that situation you had when you called your sister, who's a psychologist. Like, could you tell me like how you felt that day or that night, and what that call basically catapulted you into, and how it changed you and your trajectory of life?
Okay, so I assume you're referring to, there was a moment, this is 2014, so 10 years ago. There was a moment I woke up from a dream, nightmare. I was sweating, I was shaking, I was crying. And basically it was I'd realized that I'd ruined my marriage. And I called my sister, and I was deeply depressed, and I was like, look, I need help. This is not going to end well for me if I don't get some help. And she said, just go and help someone. And I didn't really understand why or what the purpose of that was, but ultimately I found someone who was in a terrible position. She had an autistic child that needed 24-hour care, and her husband had left her. So it was just her and this boy, and she was getting volunteers from online to come and just give her some kind of space. And it was through that I realized that actually I was still doing okay. I was actually not as worse off as I imagined I would be. And that gave me the energy and the kind of the drive to figure out what I needed to do. And that became this 3.5-year journey of travel and healing and all the rest of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy how there's like a couple moments where we feel like shit and everything's breaking apart. And then it's kind of, later on, you see how it put everything together, right? How it happened for us. And I think that's also stuff we don't like talk about enough, right? Like, I mean, that's why I also wanted to thank you straight in the beginning, because I think there needs to be more people like you, working on these topics, because, we have a fucked up society that's focusing on the wrong things at the moment, and probably for a long time as well. So your grandfather went to war, right? I also have like a lot of war history in my family and a lot of trauma. So it affected your dad, obviously, right? That's what you talked about in another podcast, I believe. And I want to go there a little bit. Like, do you think like we're like literally the first generation, let's say in the Western Hemisphere, that can really work through that trauma? Because we kind of have the knowledge, we can reach out, to people across the globe and like do the work.
I think we're the first generation that has very easy access to it. My partner's parents are both psychologists and healers, and they're almost 70. So it was around. It just wasn't as freely available as you said. And you can jump on your phone and get an app, and you have 24-hour access to somebody that can help you. And not only that, it's actually more. There is so much of it now that it's actually promoted quite heavily, and it's. I can't imagine 50, 60 years ago as a man that you're going to be going into a men's circle or going to therapy. Whereas now it's almost questioned why you don't. So.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I've had to work through a lot of like that generational trauma, especially like from like war, but that's been like 3-4 generations before. And like you also talked about like how you lifted, like how you felt that that trauma lifted at some point, right? Like you took mushrooms with your dad. Do you want to elaborate a bit on that one?
Yeah. So what I get into a lot is rite of passage and initiation. And that's one of the biggest issues that we have in society for men, because traditionally, 11, 12, 13, you'd have a rite of passage and the boy would be removed from society and he'd go through an initiation, he'd come back a man. There'd be this pivotal moment in life where it was kind of a stake in the ground moment for him. And we don't have that anymore. So unfortunately, we've got a whole bunch of men running around ruling the world and causing war who are psychologically still stuck in boyhood. And one of the fascinating things is that when a boy or a girl goes through a rite of passage, her parents actually need to go through one as well. Because if you look at every rite of passage and, you go from kind of a child to an adolescent to an adult or to a teenager and then an adult, and then you get married and then you have children and then at some point you become an elder. There are all these different rites of passages through life that we don't have. Some of them we do, like marriage or whatever, but if the boy and the girl goes off and they do a rite of passage and they come back and the parents haven't done their own, there's not enough room for them. The parents haven't moved over. So there's not enough room for them on that step, or they don't see them as any different. So I had gone off and I'd done a lot of these different things, and I think it was 31 at the time, and I was, very much an adult. I still wouldn't have called myself a man, but I was very much an adult. And this one moment, the family was in Nepal, and we convinced my dad that it'd be a good idea to do mushrooms. And it was one of the greatest experiences of our life. It was like you could feel this very limited cube that he was living in for 60 odd years dissolve. And then suddenly he was open to the possibility of things not being exactly the way he imagined them to be. And then he saw me not only as a son, but as a friend and as a man and as a brother and it was just this very, very powerful, very healing moment for us, for me, for him, for the family. It was, it was beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy how one like little situation can change a lot, because that's obviously going to change his relationship with everybody else in the family, not just yours with him, right? It's gonna lift a lot of the baggage from him that he had, probably with his dad still. And
well, if you look at it, as time being a man-made construct, so all we have is the present moment, past and future all happening simultaneously. Any healing that he is doing now is also happening for his father, for his grandfather. It goes both ways. So there was a moment after we had that experience, I kind of thought, oh, so this is the very, I hadn't even gotten into men's work at this point. But for me, this was like, oh, so I have a healthy relationship with my father now. But once I got into men's work, I started to realize that actually there was a whole lifetime of healing that hadn't happened. There was this moment where we're now good, like me and him are best friends. But what about the 30 years before that? So there was a conversation that we ended up having a few years later where we just went into it and we acknowledged that he couldn't be there as I was growing up, how I needed him to be. And this was a conversation where I could literally feel the intergenerational trauma just fucking dissolve. And that was the moment. It was one of those very few moments in life where you just remember it as if it was yesterday, and you're so grateful that it happened.
Yeah, it like clicks.
Yeah,
in the heart, in the belly, and in the head. I've had that one as well, one time. Yeah, the importance of actually being a father, right? Like that's something that I thought about whilst preparing for this podcast, because I'm a father now as well, and like my son is very much a mentor to me, and without him knowing. And there's a lot of coaches out there, right, that kind of call themselves life coaches, and they're all single, or they run around with like some other chick, and then they switch partners all the time. Like how important do you think it is to actually be a father in that journey to being a man, right, with all the pillars that we should have and could live up to?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. There's a meme going around. I wish I had the confidence of a 23-year-old life coach. And it's just like, I'm 41 and I know a lot, but there's a shitload that I've no understanding of. And as far as the rites of passage, it traditionally goes, you become a man and then you become a father. And that is kind of one of the main reasons you're on earth, is to actually reproduce and to sow a legacy of love and of creation and of beauty. And I'll be a father this year, and it's something that I'm very much looking forward to. It's something that I've resisted for a long time, because I know the old me needs to die, and there needs to be a process. And this is what an initiation is. It's like a part of us dies so the new part of us can be born. And yeah, it's the unfortunate thing is a lot of guys don't become men before they have children. So you're having a bunch of kids having more kids, rather than having actual men who are on purpose and who are grounded and present and aware, and then they're able to pass those skills and that down. And as well, that healthy relationship that they can then cultivate with their children.
Mm-hmm. I can only speak for myself, but like for me, like knowing that I was going to be a father kind of was the catalyst to actually look myself in the mirror, right? Like it was the beginning. Like I had all these, the universe told me like you're living, on the wrong fast track. Like stop doing that. I had accidents, had all like everything that you can think of, pain, nerve pain, like the whole thing. But like the actual catalyst was the knowledge of becoming a father, because I have a couple nephews, and I knew like they actually see everything, they hear everything, like they're going to be a mirror, right? Like if you behave in a certain way, they will, be that person. So, but then nonetheless, once he was there, like it was completely different, right? Than I actually thought it was going to be anyway. So there's nothing you can basically, he's 3. Yeah. So yeah, 3.5. Yeah. Yeah, that's so. Yeah, congratulations, by the way, on that journey that's going to start. It's going to be amazing. You talked about that, the rite of passage, and Are there any other like pillars that you think should be part of our journey and into becoming men that we kind of completely left out?
I think responsibility, Jordan Peterson talks about this a lot, but responsibility is one of the main pieces that really define or differentiate between boyhood and manhood. And one of the questions I ask men on my retreats and my workshops is, when did you realize the moment you were a man? And a lot of them are just like, I'm not. You know, these guys are 30s and 40s and they're like, actually, I don't think that. I think I'm still a boy. And then you get somebody who's like 11 when my father left and I had to take care of my siblings. And then suddenly at 11, this guy's been given responsibility that, you know, probably at 11 he shouldn't have been given, but that's the way life turned out. And then boom, that's when he had to step up. And there's a lot of guys in society that just don't have enough responsibility, and therefore, regardless of initiation or not, they're still boys.
Yeah. Would you say that like the school system that we kind of cultivated, you know, since World War II has been like a big problem in this whole thing?
I have a lot of opinions on this stuff.
Yeah, me too. So we can go there. No problem.
Yeah. So the problem with, you know, when we had the agrarian society and boys would go off with their parents on farms, or with their father on the farms, and the uncles and the grandfather and the cousins, and you'd be around boys and men. You'd be around male energy. And then Industrial Revolution comes in, fathers go off to work, and boy stays home with mum. And then, you know, likely father comes home, all he has to do is provide for the family. So he's probably not having a great time because there's no real emphasis on discovering a purpose. It's just make money and put a roof over our heads. So, you know, maybe he comes home and sits in front of TV and watches TV, or maybe hits the drink, or maybe he's probably not present. So boy doesn't get the best version of father. All he gets is a couple of hours a day or an evening when dad's not in a great mood. Boy goes off to school and most of his teachers are female. So from, you know, up to the age of 18, all this kid gets, as other than potentially just a more tyrannical type father figure for a couple of hours a day, he gets women that he realizes that if he pleases, he'll get further ahead. He'll get better marks if he becomes friendly with the teachers. And this sets us up to fail because we have no healthy male role models. And, you know, the school system, when it's designed for us to sit down for 6 or 7 hours a day and memorize things that are ultimately pretty useless, and not to follow our passions and not to be outside and playing in nature. And yeah, it's not a system that I intend on participating in moving forward, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think about, you know, homeschooling and all these type of things, surely, right? Also, I'm not gonna, well, you know, let's see, right? I'm not gonna leave any stone unturned. Let's leave it at that. You know, I'm still kind of, you know, I still have one foot in Germany, so you're right, I have to be a little bit careful here. Yeah.
No, I won't be long in Germany, and yeah, I mean, even, you know, my sister's in Australia and she homeschools her 2 kids. She's managed to set her life up in a way that her husband quit his job to help her job, and they work a couple of days a week and they homeschool their kids, and it's a really beautiful lifestyle, and that's the intention. Yeah, I don't want to put my kids into a system where there's, I know it's not like this everywhere, but there is, I've spoken to parents where at their school, you're not allowed to question when the children says that they're a different gender or an animal, to the point where the janitors are putting litter boxes in the toilets because these kids are saying that they're cats. And I don't participate in that. So,
where were you in 2020?
I was in Berlin. I was having a great time, actually. I had this incredible apartment in Berlin, this giant loft. I lost my architecture job, so it was like, all right, full time into men's work.
Was that just a couple years ago, or when did you stop with your?
So 2020 was when I got out of architecture. Yeah.
Okay, I thought it was earlier. Okay.
No, I was doing men's work 2018, but I was in that precipice of I don't want to do it full time because I still need the money. I can't get rid of my architecture job because I still need the money on it. And then COVID was like, dude, just fucking jump.
Yeah.
And then the moment I jumped, within a week, 3 men reached out to me randomly asking for coaching. And I was like, oh, I guess that was the right decision.
Yeah. Yeah. I was also in Germany in 2020. And then, kind of, that was a catalyst to say, okay, this is it. I lived like right in the city. I was looking out of the window. There was like a little school. Children were walking there by themselves with a mask on. I'm like, okay, this is impossible for me. So we started buying a bunch of land right here where we are now, and we're just gonna build like a retreat center and all the good stuff, maybe a farm as well. And yeah, but it's been a journey, right? A lot of problems, of course, but it's part of it. I think there's nothing better than not having to deal with that again, because who knows, right?
It's coming.
Yeah, it's coming.
It is.
Yeah,
it is coming.
Yeah, I also think so. The like jumping into the abyss, right? You just talked about it. We'll just pick up there, and like believing in whatever you're called to do. Like, do you think, like, because with me, like around 30, 31, 32, 33, like a lot changed in that sense, right? Like trusting more my feeling, like really going inwards. Do you, like with the men you work, do you see that around that age, there's like a shift in energy? And is there like a pattern that you can recognize?
It's pretty common around 28 to have your Saturn return and life just implodes
29,
and
yeah.
everything turns to shit.
Yeah, that was with me, yeah.
Yeah. But what I do recognize is actually around 33, a lot of people, and it was this for me. 33 was when I left and I started traveling, and it was the moment where my eyes widened and I kind of, realized that there was more to it. But then I had this experience in Guatemala. I'd just come out of this retreat at the ashram where I was. There was a 19-year-old dude there, and he just travels the world and sits in silence. And it gave me so much hope that there are people at that age doing this work. And then in retreats, I'll meet a dude who's in his 60s and his life's a mess because he's been so numb for so long that he didn't want to look at his shit until at some point his wife is like, if you don't do it, we're over. So it totally depends on every person's journey. But yeah, often there's kind of these around the decades as well. Around the end of the decade, you start to reevaluate your life as you feel yourself getting older. And I'm 41, and so far my 40s have been best years ever.
Yeah. For me, the past couple of years definitely been challenging, but also like the best years. So, I mean, would always repeat whatever happens. It was good. Definitely good. Yeah. It's just like, I see like either it goes like two ways, right? Like either people stick to the bullshit they were doing in their 20s, or, around the Saturn return, like there's a big bang and they kind of change, that's kind of what happened to me or with me. And like, otherwise, I don't know, you just end up in a dead end, right? If you keep going that like, it's not going to end well for sure. So you said, there was like a lot of porn with you, right? A lot of alcohol, I guess, right?
I was pretty consistently drinking from 16 until 33.
Yeah. Yeah, same here. Yeah. A lot of alcoholism in the family. It's interesting because from one side, actually from both sides, beer on the one hand in Bavaria is kind of considered normal, right? And then on the other, wine is considered normal, like for lunch. So that's kind of how you grow up. So it's crazy.
And that's, so Germany has a drinking culture. Australia has a drunk culture. So in Australia, you go out and you don't just have a couple of beers. Like, you get wasted. You go out on a Friday and it's who can drink the most. and then you have hair of the dog Saturday morning and you start day drinking, and then you're shit-faced by the evening. And this, it's most of the sports are sponsored by alcohol and junk food.
Sure.
Like it's a fucking backwards culture. And so for me, drinking was normal and everybody does it. And then when I quit drinking, people are like, what's wrong with you? It's like, dude, nothing. So now for me, it's like I haven't had a drink in a long time, and people know that I don't drink and nobody questions it. And but it's the most, because it was because of the alcohol that I got into the drugs, and then it's because of the drugs that everything turned to shit. So it's like, oh, I want to stop the drugs. I said, well, stop drinking. It's like, oh yeah, that works.
Yeah, definitely can relate to that. It's like very similar. A lot of substance abuse, and definitely triggered by the alcohol, right? Like also, like ADHD, like pills since university, a lot of that stuff. And then, as I said before, right? Like once you're going to have a kid, like that's when it kind of, right? Like it shifted for me at least, right? When I said, okay, I have to stop this, whatever it is. And yeah, so it's same as you, I'm not drinking at all anymore. It's been definitely the best decision, amongst a few others. So maybe we can, dive into medicine here. Maybe that's the segue. I know you work with Kambo. I haven't touched that yet. Unfortunately, I didn't have just didn't come up, right? There wasn't any timer to do it. And how do you view like this over feminized kind of society that we're in, especially in relation to men, and like psychedelics, right? Everyone talks about it. Everyone wants to do therapy with psychedelics and ketamine, and nobody has done the actual work beforehand. Nobody has talked to people, right? Like, how dangerous do you think this trajectory is? And yeah, let's keep it at that.
I think anything that we can do to give people an alternative to alcohol and harder substances is a benefit. I think his name was Professor David Koch, who was an English professor years ago. They said to him, we need to come up with a way to help with the alcohol abuse that's happening in England. And he went off and he did this huge study, and he went through every single drug and the damage that it does socially, personally, to families, financially, he went through the whole thing. And what he discovered was that the most dangerous drug that there is actually alcohol. And he said, we need to open up smoking cafes, and we need to actually make it more difficult for people to get alcohol. So they fired him because that wasn't in alignment with their plan. I think the more people that get to try medicine under a safe or in a safe container, it's going to be very beneficial. What I see the problem being is that there are so many people that aren't trained, that run off and they do something once and they think, oh yeah, I can just serve people or facilitate people. And I've seen it in Kambo a lot. I've seen it with ayahuasca. There was a case in Australia. There's been a couple of cases in Australia where people have died because the facilitator was a fucking idiot. And it had nothing to do with the medicine. It was because it wasn't served properly and it wasn't served in a safe way. So then they put it onto the medicine and say, oh, well, this shouldn't be legal because it's dangerous. And it's like, well, it's only dangerous when it's served by an idiot. Doctors are the third highest leading cause of death. Like there needs to be room for an understanding of what is happening. And if people are trained properly, most of these things are actually not dangerous at all. So for me, that's where I see the danger in people just freely kind of running around serving these things thinking they're some kind of a fucking shaman.
Yeah. Yeah, surely, because I think the ones that are trained, they wouldn't give it to anybody that's too unstable to actually handle it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an instance. I met a guy here in Berlin, and he'd just come back from the jungle, and he was collecting Kambo medicine. So I just assumed that he was a facilitator, and we were talking about it. And a couple of weeks later, I run into him, and he's served a woman. And one of the side effects of Kambo is you get what's called frog face. So it looks like an allergic reaction. So your face swells up, your eyes swell up, your esophagus can swell. I've never encountered, I've served the medicine over 1,000 times. I've never encountered anybody that's not been able to breathe. But for some people, the fear creeps in because everything's starting to swell and they start to freak out. And this guy, I met up with him, I ran into him, and he's like, "Oh man, have you ever seen somebody face swell?" I was like, "Yeah, dude, like every fucking third session." "Oh, I've never seen it before." I was like, "Well, how many times have you done it?" And he said, 3. I said, "No, how many times have you received the medicine?" He's like, 3. I'm like, "You've received it 3 times and you're serving somebody else." It's like, "Yeah." "Well, maybe you should go and sit with it a few more times." And he's like, "Yeah, that's your opinion." I'm like, "So it is." So it is, mate. And then that's just it's just an example of, I think, a very common thing these days.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always dangerous. I mean, I've lived in Colombia almost 10 years ago, and I met a guy that just got there. It was actually my ex-girlfriend's cousin, I think. He just got there to do ayahuasca, and the respect these people had there, and it was, like, it showed you that you have to handle it like that, right? Like, it's not just a thing that you travel to a city to, right? And then meet some guy in an apartment like they do it in Berlin now, right? And they put up some stuff, some tents inside the apartments, and then they have a ceremony there. Like, it's fucking crazy. Like, once you get to that point, like, we took a wrong turn, right? Like, it's insane. Yeah. So, what do you think where this journey is going? Like, in terms of, medicine in general and Western Europe, for example. I mean, Portugal is kind of opening up a little bit. Like, what's your take on that?
I think it's it's a slow moving freight train that is getting faster. The amount of research coming out in regards to mushrooms and MDMA and ketamine therapy, there's just no denying now how beneficial it is for the mental health space. And, especially in America, where I think it's something like 28 veterans kill themselves a day. It's becoming so necessary, given the way that we live our lives. We're from social media and screens and the cost of living and all of these things is becoming so stressful. The mental health is really starting to diminish, and as well as the pollution and the poison that's in foods. And 2024 is going to be a big year, and it's a lot of people are going to really benefit from the medicine.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good thing.
And do you think, like, especially because I know a lot about the German market, and I see that people are probably going to reach out more and more to people like you in the next few years, especially like after that pandemic and stuff, right? Like, do you see that as well? Like, is that kind of the job you have is probably just gonna go through the roof, right? Like, in terms of of work.
So when COVID started, I received a message from a guy in Brazil, and a man that he served medicine. He got COVID, this guy, and he was super sick, and the doctors came and they're like, "Dude, you've got it." So this was in like very close to the beginning where people were freaking out, and he had a fever and he had all the symptoms, and he did Kambo, and the doctor came back the next day and it was gone. And I spoke to a colleague about it, And we both agreed, it's like, this is not to be shared, because the people that know the medicine will come for it. This is not some kind of magical pill that somebody that's never heard of it until they read a post comes out and they want to, because they want to experience it. It's for the people that actually know it. And very slowly people start to hear about these things. They hear about them from a friend. I've had many conversations with people randomly where they're like, oh, do you know anything about Kambo? I've heard a lot about it. I'd love to try it. And that's kind of how it happens. When you're ready for it, it will come to you. And before that, it's just not a good idea to do it. And so many people with these medicines, they chase it because they want to experience what the other guy had. And so many times it backfires. And it's just like, it's a spirit medicine. And this is what a lot of people don't get. It's like, this is not just a plant, and it's not just the secretion from a frog, and it's not just the secretion from the glands of a toad. Like, this thing is so deeply connected to spirit that if you don't have that connection, and if you're not in tune with that, then it's not going to go well. And yeah, the more you do become in tune with that, the more benefit you receive from these things.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I think that the problem is that, especially, the younger generation grow up and like everything is ready and readily available at all times, right? Like food, like nobody has seen like a chicken being killed, right? Like, blood splashing around or whatever. Like it's disgusting, right? Like I remember like sitting next to an American girl at the Oktoberfest like many years ago, and you get half the chicken, right? And so she saw the inside of the chicken and she was like, gross. What is that? Like she didn't know that the chicken had a carcass inside, and right, like that there were bones, because she was just used to the pink chicken breast. I'm like, what the, like, that's kind of, when you realize like what's going on. But yeah, that's the problem, right? Because they've seen it somewhere, and then it has to be there the next day, right? Like I have to be like able to get it. I want it, right? And that just doesn't work like that.
Or it does work like that, and they get fucked up because of it, and then yeah, that's exactly the problem, man. It's this society where we can get everything, and we're so comfortable, and everything we want is on our doorstep the next day, and that's one of the beautiful aspects of my journey has been this realization that growth comes through discomfort, and to chase the things that scare you, and to chase the things you don't want to do because they're uncomfortable. And then you do them, and it's so much more profound than anything else. And yeah, I mean, everybody's on their own journey, and you can't take someone out of it. And no matter how badly you see them on a path to absolute fucking failure and pain, that's their journey.
Yeah, definitely. I think discomfort is, especially for us men, without discomfort, there's not real joy, right? Like for me as well, like I never wanted to talk publicly about these topics, right? And just, that's why I had to do it. It was one of the reasons. I'm like, fuck it, let's do this.
I have a practice that is one of the trainings that I'm in. It's called the edge practice. So you're in a small group, and they find your edge. And for someone, it was camping by herself out in nature overnight, petrified of snakes, petrified of the dark. That's her edge. So she had to do it. For somebody else, it was dancing in public, but like standing up on a park bench and just for 15 minutes just dancing. And mine was actually doing Instagram lives. Like, I fucking hate it. I find it so uncomfortable. So of course I have to do it 5 times.
Yeah, that's why you're doing it right now. Exactly.
By the third one, I still sweat. I get on it. But by the 5th one, I'm like, tonight's the 5th one, and actually I kind of enjoy it now.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Right. It's just practice. Crazy stuff. Yeah. For me, I mean, like speaking in public, it was not the problem that I had with like speaking in public. It was more, I've learned about geopolitics like very early on, right? Like because my mother's from Croatia, and then, I just got into that whole war conversation and oil and, money. What's money actually, right? And like, how does this whole thing work in the background? So I'm like, fuck, I know too much, right? Like, should I talk about this? What happens if I'm gonna like apply for a finance job later on? Because like that was the thing back in the day, And so no, I cannot talk about this, right? Like, look at all these authors that talk about these kind of topics, they end up, somewhere else very quickly. So that's, that's the story I've been telling myself, or I told myself before. And so, yeah, it's good to work through that kind of stuff.
When COVID happened, I had the same thing. There's all these people coming online belittling people who wanted to do their own research, and like anti-vaxxers should die. And it's like, hang on a second. And I was like, I can't talk about that because I might lose followers. I'm like, whoa. What kind of a fucking bullshit thought process is that? Authenticity is something that I talk about often, and integrity is something I talk about often. And if you can't be in alignment with the truth of your heart, then you're out of integrity with yourself. I ended up writing a post on the current conflict in Palestine in the very beginning, and I got fucking lambasted for it. And I was simply pointing to the propaganda. I didn't pick sides. I pointed to the propaganda, and it turns out 100 days later, actually everything I said was correct. But I went at it a little bit from the wrong angle, and I needed to change my perspectives. So in the end, I took the post down and I wrote a story actually owning that I didn't do it correctly. And that is one of the more uncomfortable things that you get to do when you live from an authentic place and when you speak your truth, and sometimes your truth isn't always correct.
Yeah. For me, that was kind of a problem in a sense was growing up, because I would always stick to like me, right? Like very hard headed, and, got bullied on the side and stuff like that, because then it would never fit in, right? Like I always had my own mind and like would stick to it, which caused a lot of other problems. But like that, if I knew something, I would say, okay, I know it. If I wouldn't know it 100%, I would say, okay, let's talk about it. Let's discuss, right? Like maybe there's something I can learn from you. And I think that's really important, because like then later, like the older you get, right, they try to, or even in primary school, I think it starts to try to, get you out of that mindset, right? That whatever you feel, whatever you think is right, like everything that's in that book is the right thing. Like don't think too much, right? Don't think outside the box. Like, come on, like that's not good, right? You want to fit in, right? So I've had a lot of these situations later on where, I said, okay, I'm going to speak my truth now. And I got kicked out and, got bad grades for that. And then eventually I just shut up, right? Just when, now I have like a couple of friends that I talk to, and everybody else who wants to talk to me about these topics, like I'm here, right? But I'm not gonna go there and tell you how it works, right? Because it's always the same thing that you just talked about in Palestine. It's always the same thing, right? Like it's been going on for many hundreds of years. If you see the pattern once, if you understand it, if you see the framing around it, it's always the same basically. It just looks a little bit different. So that to me, before I would always try and convince people and waste a lot of time doing that, right? So when 2020 happened, for me, it was easy to say, okay, right, like I take no part in this because I've been there before with other topics. So yeah, and now people come around and, they try to kind of talk about this kind of stuff. And I'm like, yeah, what's the point? Like, you know how it works. Just do your own research because you have to do it. Like read some books. I'm not here to educate you. All right.
So when this COVID thing happened and I kind of stayed quiet for a little bit and I realized that I couldn't. So I started to just post some things that were more in alignment with my truth. and I lost a lot of friends and I lost a lot of followers. And at some point it turned. And at some point people would come to me and they're like, thank fuck somebody is speaking about this. And then this was the trajectory that it went from that point. Similarly, when I spoke about the whole gender thing going on, I've spoken about it a few times and people are like, thank you for speaking up about it, because so many people don't. So many people sit on the fence because they don't want to step on anybody's toes. They want to take the middle ground. And I don't see that as leadership. I think we are in a state in society where people need to become a beacon of truth. Even if that the truth is different to mine, if that's your truth, run with it. But don't sit on the fence because you don't want to step on somebody's toes and you want to play this nice guy that kind of avoids conflict. But yeah, I really respect people that actually just go for it, even when I don't agree with them.
Yeah. I mean, I'm fine with a different opinion, right? Like I'm just not going to accept you pushing your opinion on me, like forcefully, right? I won't do it. I won't do it. And that was interesting with what happened there, because they were doing it. And once you said something or I said something, then all of a sudden, like, why do you push like your agenda on mine? I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm just like, I'm replying. Right. That's right. It was interesting because like, just like you, I was used to, kind of clearing out people beforehand, but that one also was interesting because I kind of lost a few, because I lost respect in them because they wouldn't, they wouldn't think. Right. Like I like to hang out with people that kind of use their brain and like, it doesn't matter what topic we talk about. And with some people, I just stick to a couple topics, but like at least think, right. And at least allow a different opinion and at least let's talk about it. Right. And like in that happening, or in that situation, I kind of realized, okay, these people that they don't want to think anymore. And they just gave up, and that's kind of when they lost me as a friend, right? Because that's not what I identify with. I don't want to hang around with these people anymore, right? So it was easy for me to move away from that. Yeah.
Well, that's the other thing. You make space in your life for people who are more aligned with your values. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
Exactly, it's part of the journey. It's so good. So the coaching you do a lot of one-on-ones, right? You do group coaching. Like, do you think group coaching is more powerful than one-on-one with men?
I actually think people need both. There's a real benefit in having one-to-one time where you can specifically dive into a certain wound or a certain experience that you've got. And a lot of the time in group coaching, that's not really possible to go there. And a lot of the time, men need other men to be held by other men, to be seen by other men, to experience. A very common thing that happens in circle is when somebody's like, oh, I've got this issue. And then 3 or 4 other guys are like, oh, yeah, I did that last year. Oh, yeah, that happened to me 3 years ago. And then the guy's like, oh, wow, I'm not the only one. So there's an incredible benefit in men being around men. And for me, it's, I went through from Tantra to breathwork to plant medicine to hypnotherapy, all of these different things. And for me, the most powerful medicine was other men. And it was being around other men, and it was learning from other men, and just going through difficult experiences with other men. And yeah, groups, retreats, these things are really, really powerful. I've never had any man come to a workshop or a retreat and say that they regretted coming.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. But for me, I kind of always went the solo route, especially these last couple of years. I work with a lot of different coaches and a lot of different people, and, learned one thing from this guy. And then, this little key went in there. And yeah, I mean, I've also not really had the opportunity to go somewhere, for a couple of days just by myself, just because of the circumstance. But, we'll see. Maybe that's going to change. So, yeah.
If it's,
do you want to say? Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I understand your circumstance, and if you truly want it, you can make it happen.
Yeah, of course. That's always the case, for sure. Definitely. So let's go into your offerings a bit, what you guys are working on. Because I've seen you do a relationship container, or is that a workshop with your now girlfriend, right?
So myself and my partner have it's a workshop coming up in Amsterdam. Yeah, it's in a few days actually.
Yeah, so that's going to be too late.
Too late.
Yeah.
I have a men's group with 3 of my best mates that I met in the work called 13 Pines, and we've just run a 7-day free mastery challenge, where every day for 7 days you get a new challenge. We've got 300 men in that, and men are just loving it. We have a 4-month container that starts in a couple of weeks that ends with a 5-day initiation rite of passage. And that's capped at 20 men. And then there's actually an opportunity to attend 3 of those days of the retreat for another group of men that are from the public. So that's going to be one of the most powerful men's retreats I've been a part of, for sure.
Where's that going to be?
And then that'll be just outside of Austin. So a bit far for you maybe, but there's going to be more coming up in Europe. There's my summer gets really full, and I don't overwhelm myself quite yet, and then eventually it just starts to come, and then if it's anything like the last year, it's basically every week for the next 5 months starting in March, and pretty done.
Yeah, hopefully next year we can host one in my zone. That would be amazing. Yeah, long journey to get there, but it's already been a long one, and yeah, we're quite successful, in those little mini steps. Okay, very cool. These new friends that you have, so would you say the work that you do publicly kind of pulled in these new friends that you have on a more profound level?
Absolutely.
Right.
You start to hang around other men of the caliber of men that you want to be like and around and with. And, the friends that I had 20 years ago were so different. And I love them. But we're on completely different paths, and we do different things. And these men that I hang around now are just in full alignment with who I am and where I want to go and what I'm doing with my life. And that's what happens. You get yourself to a certain frequency and you attract that at the same frequency. So
yeah, totally.
Highly recommend it.
Yeah. I mean, I've always kind of wanted a brother growing up. I've missed that because my dad was always working. He was never at home, so my mom was there all the time. And then I moved to the UK when I was 15, just completely different thing, without them. And so, yeah, I think there's always room for improvement of being, supported with men and by men and in groups with men. Cause I think that's definitely, the way to go also for me, for sure.
Especially as a father.
Yeah.
To have other friends who are fathers that you can talk about the pressures and the burdens of life.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, because the ones that, I'm in a very small town here, and it's 2,000 souls, in the winter. And so I met a couple cool guys, but, they're all 40, 49, 50, 4 kids, right? They're in a different zone in life, and it's a different part of life, but nonetheless, there's always something to to learn from them. So yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Well, that's, the masculine totem pole is a very underutilized concept. And that is that you have men in your life, white hairs, gray hairs, young bucks and boys, and get men from every generation in your life, because every generation you can learn from. whether it's a 70-year-old or a 60-year-old guy that has just been around, twice as long as we have, or whether it's a teenager who actually knows more about the fucking internet, even though he's been around for half the time we have. Like, there's always wisdom that you can pull from different people of different generations. So it's, I got a couple of men from men's groups that are in their 60s, late 60s, and it's just whenever there's like a deep problem, you call up them and the perspective you get is like nothing you could have imagined. And it's beautiful medicine.
Yeah, definitely. I think also like the past 3 or 4 years kind of helped like opening up these boundaries and like, like these fake boundaries and fake walls that people put up. Cause I see that, even before, especially like when you grow up in a country like Germany, no one wants to share information, right? Like it's a secret how I got here, like no one wants to talk about the hardships and like what went wrong. And like, it was a, easy path to get here to build that company, right? It was an easy path to build that family. Like, no one talks about the problems, and it would be so much easier if people just shared that, right? Like, everyone, like, it helps them to talk about it. It helps the other person if they knew about it. And, I hope that because it's kind of what I feel that these past couple of years helped with that, right? Like, it's easier to talk about these kind of topics, I think. Maybe that's also because I changed, but I don't know. Like, do you see that too?
I mean, in the circles that I run, it's pretty common. It's pretty easy, but that's what we do. It's like, what's the most challenging thing you're experiencing in this moment? Like, well, here it is. Oh, yeah, cool. Yeah, no, he dealt with that the other day. It's like, oh, perfect. So yeah, man, men's circles are just, can't get enough of them.
No. Do you think there's like a cap in terms of the number of people where it gets too big?
Depends on the style of the circle. You could have a circle of 3, and I've been in circles. Actually, I got a men's group starting up next week. There's 75, but then it's you break down into smaller groups. So you'll have a smaller group of 5 or 7 men that is like you're with the whole time, and you go on retreat with the 75 men. But yeah, it's just a different format. Yeah.
Is that also mostly US people? Or yeah. Why do you think that is? Why is it always like, because there's so many people doing this kind of stuff in Austin. There's so many people, right? Like doing this kind of stuff in California, like 10 years ago or 15 or whatever. But like, why is that? Why is that?
It's just it's where people are at and what people are open to. Like, you get guys in, the shit that people wear in Venice Beach, you're probably not going to get them same type of people walking through Munich. Like, it's a very different culture, and they are open to different things. It's very common in Australia, men's work, yet it is so necessary. I did a workshop there, and I couldn't tell if men were just far more fucked up there, or they were not so fucked up that actually they still came to the workshop. But these guys were broken because of the culture that we have in Australia around men and masculinity. There is, this stuff is happening around Europe, but it's I think because of language barriers and because of cultural differences, it's just not as widely known. I started a men's group when I got to Berlin because I didn't know of one. And then it turns out actually there was quite a few. But yeah, there's a lot happening in Europe, that's for sure. Just maybe not on the scale. I mean, the Mankind Project is another one that's pretty big and prevalent, and that's worldwide. Sacred Sons come a lot to Europe.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like I thought about this a bit, and I think it has to do just with the recent history, right? Like how did your parents grow up? Like, is it, cause like, I think in the States, the past 100 years have been quite nice, right? Like in a sense, right? Like it's been not as rocky, right? And compared to, let's say here, like former Yugoslavia, right? You know, I still have uncles that lost all their hair in the war, right? So this guy is not gonna go to a men's group, right? He had to swallow everything. Like he's not gonna go and reach out to another man. Like it's too recent, right? So their children, maybe, but maybe the father was too, let's say too, you know, top down, right? Like too controlling. Maybe they're not going to do that either. So maybe it's going to take 2 generations to clean that up. I think that's the reason why like we see so much from over there, but sure, also language is easier, right? Like you have, you know, 330 million people, you know, talking about one topic. It's easier to, or like, you know, that part out of those 330 talking about that topic, it's just going to resonate differently than when there's like, you know, 5% talking in Romanian and 5 in Croatian, and right, like it's shitty.
But you have a good point. You talk about the, you know, what, 30 years ago you had the wall coming down and you had the Stasi, so nobody says anything, and so now you walk around, at least in Berlin, and people are not overly communicative. They're all a little bit withdrawn and a little bit. You don't have that in America.
Yeah.
You don't have that in Australia. You walk down the street in Australia and the dude, you know, across the road will stick up his hand and yell out, "Hey, mate, how are you?" And he's like, "Oh, fuck." So there's definitely a cultural difference that keeps some countries far more withdrawn and less willing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. So I guess that's a good way to end the podcast.
All right.
Thank you for what you do, man.